Everybody. Today we're going to go ahead and do a little presentation here on citizen responsibilities. I think it's super important to remember that we all say, oh, we have the right for this and we have the right for that and we have the right to do whatever, which isn't true. But along with the rights that we get, we have to give something back. There's nothing for free. You don't just get what you want because you want it. There's always a give and a take in any kind of situation. So today what I want to talk about are, as citizens, those of you who live in the United States, you have certain responsibilities, and in those responsibilities is the give and the take for the rights that you are going to go ahead and have. So let's go ahead and look at our PowerPoint and we'll go from there. So let's talk first about having rights, and rights are costly. They're not free. The first 10 amendments that we got gave us a lot of personal freedoms, and they gave us a lot of legal freedoms. We didn't want the king. We were afraid of a king. And so we want to make sure that that wasn't an issue that we had. But getting that is a price, and we know you can't have one without the other. So what we're looking at today is what is a responsibility. And you've always heard your parents, be responsible or take responsibility, blah, blah, blah. Well, the bottom line is the dictionary says a responsibility is when you have a duty to do something, okay? And the ability to do something, the authorization to make something happen. If you have all those things, you have to act, okay? That means that as citizens, we have a duty to make certain decisions because we're partners with the government. The government is run by us, the people, but we have an obligation to support the government, and we also have an obligation to make sure that the government's running smoothly. We can't just sit back, watch TV, and hope it all works out, because I think we've seen recently that doesn't really happen. So as citizens, we do have a big responsibility. We should exercise our rights and our responsibilities, and exercise just means you have to do it. Some of these rights and responsibilities are legally required. We literally have to do them because it's the law. But sometimes things are not legally required, but we should be doing them so that our country stays free. Number one, responsibility, it's a mandatory one. We don't have an option here. You have to obey the laws. You have to obey the state laws in California and the federal laws that the big bad government in the United States puts together. And even local torrance laws, or even the laws that are in our school, okay? The courts, judicial branch, and the police, executive branch, are there to make sure that the laws are obeyed and that they're fair. If you disobey the law, you're going to have a penalty. If you don't pick up your room when your parents tell you, there's a consequence. There's always a consequence for what we do. There's always a consequence for what we choose not to do. So we also have a mandatory responsibility to pay taxes. And you guys are pretty young. You don't know all about that, but what a hassle they are. But they're payments that we make to the government so the government can run the things that we need. So roads, I can't go out here and make a road all by myself. I can't afford to make a road all by myself. I expect my city to do my roads for me. Well, how do they do that? We all give them money. They just don't make their own money. Money doesn't grow on trees. They can't just make it. It has to come from somewhere, and it comes from you and I. And it's our responsibility to pay those taxes so that our government can run and we can get things done. If you don't like it, then you have to vote. And you vote the people out who are making more taxes. Our other thing is looking at what do taxes pay for, because a lot of people think we don't even know what that is. So federal tax, that's the tax that Washington, D.C. has put on things. All of the money that the federal government takes goes toward the military, toward Medicare, toward paying all the federal judges, all the national park rangers, all the federal employees, veterans, prisons, all those big things that we don't even think about. Somebody has to pay for that. Our state taxes, so stuff in California, it pays for our highways, our freeways, our universities are paid, all of our schools are paid, our state parks, police, fire, lifeguards, all that sort of stuff is coming out of tax money. And we also have what we call excise taxes. And that's taxes that most states put on luxury items. Luxury items are items you and I don't need to survive. So, what you don't know is that when you purchase a certain car that's a certain amount of money over the normal, what normal people buy, you're going to pay extra tax. Tobacco, there's an extra tax on every packet of cigarettes. Every bit of beer that mom and dad bring home, there's an extra tax. Gasoline, although we need it, we have a tax on it because we could ride the bus or we could walk. We also have state tax that pays for everything else. So taxes are a big thing. It's super important for us to not only pay it, but to be aware of what it's being used for and be good citizens with our money. Federal tax. So here's what we're talking about when we're talking about the Congress in the United States of America creating and taking our money. 28% of that's going toward the military, and 20% of it's going toward healthcare. So these aren't small little amounts at all. I think what's really super interesting is you've got interest on the debt there at 18%. We owe other countries tons of trillions of dollars, and we have to pay interest on those debts. So not only are we giving money to our government, but our government's also borrowing money from other countries that they're going to have to pay back. I found what's really interesting in this chart is the little teeny tiny one that's like at 4% for education, nutrition, job training, the things that we really need. Our country doesn't spend a whole lot on them. Let's talk another mandatory. Another mandatory is jury duty. You've heard your parents gripe about it. Oh my gosh, I have jury duty. How can I get out of it or whatever? It's our job. I certainly wouldn't want to be arrested for something and then have some weird people that aren't my peers or know nothing about where I live or any of that to be judging me. So the right to a jury trial is in the Bill of Rights. You have it. But to guarantee it, that means you got to have jurors. Jurors are people like you and I. It's a random selection process. They pull our names out of the little computer, they send you the thing in the mail, and you got to go show up. You might get on a case, but you might not. Jury duty guarantees our right to a fair trial. It gives us the presumption that we're innocent until the government can prove us guilty in a court of law. And that's super, super important. Back in the olden days, they didn't care if you were guilty or not. If they didn't like you or thought you were, you're losing your head. So the jury is not the government. It's just people like you and me who get called to go sit there and do it. Another mandatory responsibility that we have in our country is to serve as a witness. So if you're subpoenaed means the government is calling you in to go into court to talk. You have to go. It's not an option. You don't go, oh, I don't really want to talk about that. No, I didn't see that guy like throw the brick through the window. That was somebody else. No, if they call you, you have to go. And they'll testify under oath. That means you promise not to lie and about any information that you have. So you don't have a right to say no on that one. You could say no if you wish, but you'll spend a little bit of time in jail. Also mandatory, and we don't have this right now in our country because we're not at war with anyone, but it's called registering for the draft and defending your country. So when you're 18, your name goes into the government has all our stuff anyway. Hello. You're automatically registered for the military. And that doesn't mean you have to go join the Marines or the whatever. It just means they've got your name. They know you're available. They know you're 18. And should the need arise, they have the right to call you in to fight for the country. Now, you can also register for the armed forces voluntarily, of course. My daughter, when she got out of high school, went and registered for the Air Force and was in the Air Force for 8 years. So you can join it all you want. Those of us who choose not to join, no problem. But if we should go to war and it's something significant, our government has the right to call us up, and we have the responsibility to fight for our country. The other thing we have as a responsibility, this one's voluntary though. We don't have to do it if we don't want to, is voting. But voting is a privilege. There are so many people in so many countries who don't have a choice to say who they want for their leaders. Their leaders are picked. Their leaders were born into the job because their father was a king or a dictator. Um, and a lot of those countries, it's not really very good there. So the ability for us to vote for our leaders is a huge, huge privilege that our founding fathers wanted us to be able to have. If you want to live in a democracy where people have a say in the government, then you better vote. That's it. People who don't vote lose your voice. So don't go griping about the way things are if you didn't go out and vote for whoever was running in the office. You can have voting in your city. So Torrance, we have voting in our state. So for our state electives and our senators and the House of Representatives people. And then we also vote for the president or the vice president. We have federal elections. So there's lots of opportunities for us to vote. And you know what? It's even the same in school. You want to vote for what we're going to have for lunch? You want to vote for anything there? Exercise your right to vote. But it's voluntary. You don't have to. Another voluntary thing to do is to participate in your community. The bottom line is we have a lot of people in our community who could use our help. We also have a lot of wonderful services in our community that really make our community great. Whenever I go over to the over by the pool over there by the library and all, you've got so many people. You got all these classes with all these little kids in there on Saturday morning. And while a lot of those people are paid, a lot of them are not. They volunteer because they love the sport, they love kids, and they want to help their community. So there are always plenty of things you can do to volunteer around town. You think as a kid you can't, but there really are a lot of amazing things. And all you got to do is walk in and say, hey, can I volunteer here? And most people will say, yeah, we can use that for sure. Our other voluntary right and responsibility is to defend the Constitution. It's voluntary, you don't have to do it. But I find it interesting when people say, well, I don't want to do that. I don't defend the Constitution. Yet you live here and you enjoy all the rights and responsibilities that our Constitution gives you. So I find that a little interesting. But that's just my take on it. Surprisingly, that's not mandatory. If you work for the government, though, you have to take an oath to do so. So when I became a teacher, because I work for the government, the state of California, and the federal government pays part of my wages, I have to take an oath that I will promise to uphold and defend the Constitution of California and of the United States of America. And I, when you say that, you die doing it. It's a big commitment to make. If you disagree with the Constitution, you have Amendment number 1, freedom of speech, all that we've been seeing this week. That doesn't mean you have the right to be violent and attack and steal and kill people. It does mean that you have the right to petition your government, tell them you're unhappy. You have the right to peacefully protest. And those are ways that you can say, I'm unhappy with the way things are. But remember, you wouldn't have that right without the Constitution already there. Just saying. Our next voluntary thing that we should always be doing is staying informed. And there's no excuse nowadays with social media, with news on every channel. There are a ton of news apps for kids. You all should have an app on your phone with the news on it, and you should watch the news for at least 10 minutes a day, every day, because there are things happening in your country and in your community that you need to know about. Why? Because as you grow older, I'm going to die and you're going to be running the country. So it's your right to petition the government and participate. If you don't know what's going on, you can't do that. You can't help people. You can't stop things that are wrong. You just sit there in a bubble and have no idea. The other voluntary thing we have, unfortunately it's voluntary, is to respect the rights and opinions of others. And I like this little quote here. Just because someone's opinion is different than your own, it does not mean that they are wrong. It doesn't mean that you are right. We just have different opinions. We all see the world differently. What is great about America is that everybody can have our own opinion and we can actually talk about our opinions. I don't have to agree with your opinion. You can have a completely opposite opinion than I do, but it's my job to respect your opinion. I could be thinking in my head, you're crazy, and I don't think you're right here, but it's your opinion. And that's what's really great about America. So, you know, if you want to walk around without your mask on outside right now during COVID, you go right ahead, but I'm going to wear mine, right? And I don't have to berate you or yell at you or be mean to you because I don't agree with you. I can, what are you going to do, right? So respecting each other is a huge thing, especially in light of all the police issues lately and our being locked down and our violence that's going on. Um, there's no reason for racism. There's no reason for all those things. People just have different opinions. People live different lives, and I think everybody's doing their very best to survive out there. So it's okay to respect that people just don't think like you. And I think that's a really good one. I wish it was more mandatory than voluntary, though. So here's what I want you to take a note. You've been taking notes, hopefully, this whole time, because that's what was the direction. And I want you to answer these two questions. Which of these responsibilities do you think are the most important? And tell me why you think that way. Use an example to explain to me why you think the way you think. Okay? When you're all finished with everything, you can go ahead and upload your question. You can put it on a regular paper and just upload it into on your notes there that you've been taking, just at the very bottom, draw a line or whatnot. Okay? And go ahead and upload that to Google Classroom. So hopefully this makes sense. Hopefully it's worthwhile for you. And we will meet up on another day. Bye, guys.